Well, the big story today, the Supreme Court has a 9-judge bench that is deciding on a very critical issue. It has to decide whether the right to privacy is a fundamental right for all citizens. Today, the Supreme Court held its first hearing in the case and the matter will resume tomorrow. But in initial observations made today, the court has said that the right to privacy is not absolute. You can't stop the legislature from imposing reasonable restrictions. This entire move was triggered by the fact that the government was making Aadhaar mandatory for all citizens, and the court decided that it first needed to decide on this basic question of right to privacy before it decided on the Aadhaar issue. My colleague A. Vaidyanathan has more.
Oddly enough, the right to privacy petitioners against the government buttressed their arguments with a quote by Arun Jaitley, the Finance and Defence Minister.
Privacy is a fundamental right.
In a March 2016 Parliament debate on Aadhaar, Jaitley said, "Is privacy a fundamental right or not? It is too late in the day to contend that privacy is not a fundamental right. I do accept that probably privacy is a fundamental right." The crux of the petitioner's argument to stop the government making Aadhaar mandatory for social and other schemes is, privacy is the heart and soul of the Constitution. That privacy is embedded both in liberty and dignity. Dignity and liberty are fundamental rights in our Constitution.
Right to privacy concerning over 1 billion people is a fundamental right. A 9-judge bench headed by the Chief Justice of India debated today for more than 4 hours, and the courtroom overflowing with lawyers, journalists and law students. The judges posed a series of questions, particularly Justice D.O. Chandrachud asking the petitioner, can the court define privacy? Privacy is a subset of liberty, and this right to privacy cannot be absolute, and the state legislature can impose restrictions.
And that's the rub, whether Parliament can restrict privacy rights on Aadhaar. The 9-judge bench on privacy could complete its hearing within the couple of days, after which it's back to the judges hearing the Aadhaar challenge. With Arunachalam Vaidyanathan and Sunil Prabhu in Delhi, Rohit Wellington for NDTV.
Well, in the 21st century, should the right to privacy be a fundamental right? We have Jay Panda here on the program tonight, Lok Sabha MP of the BJD, Dr. Ashwini Kumar, former Law Minister of India, who has in fact himself really spoken at length on this issue. Ashwini Kumar, what do you think of what the court has said today? Just let me read out some key observations. Right to privacy isn't absolute, can't stop the legislature from imposing reasonable restrictions. Privacy is a subsect of liberty. Right to privacy doesn't necessarily coexist with data protection. These are some of the various observations that have been made. You don't know how things are going to go tomorrow. But what do you think?
Well, Anili, quite clearly, I don't think none of these observations are inconsistent with the proposition that right to privacy is a fundamental right. And I say so for the following reasons. Right to privacy has, over the last several years, been treated as integral to the right to dignity. And right to dignity has been treated as at the pinnacle of constitutional values. So liberty, equality and freedom have been interpreted conjointly in an interplay of Articles 14, 19 and 21 in various decisions now after Kharak Singh and Sharma, which said that the right to privacy was a common law right and not a fundamental right. Now, R.C. Cooper, Menaka Gandhi, Coelho, these are all constitutional bench judgments. They have left no manner of doubt whatsoever that right to privacy is a fundamental human right. Now, remember one thing, Nidhi, as you rightly said, in the 21st century, is it possible at all for us to argue that right to privacy is not a fundamental right? And I'll tell you one very basic proposition that I think should be at the core of the argument in the Supreme Court. This is an age of rights, and the only political moral order that has received universal acceptance is the idea of human rights. And if right to privacy, right to reputation, right to dignity is not at the core of fundamental rights, no other right would be. And Justice Krishna Iyer in Menaka Gandhi's case said years ago, I think it was in the 80s, years ago it said, that Article 14, 19 and 21 cannot be read separately. They are part of the scheme and the spirit of the Constitution that keeps man at the height.
Just tell our viewers very
everything.
quickly, what is Article 19 and 21?
Article 21 is a right to life with dignity.
Right.
Right to life with dignity has been interpreted by the Supreme Court as being the core of the Part 3 rights, that is the fundamental rights.
So you believe that it is inevitable that right to privacy should become a fundamental right in this country, and that you certainly hope that it's headed that way?
I believe that the right to privacy has been read by the Supreme Court itself as a fundamental right. And I think what the 9 judges bench ought to do, and of course it is in their wisdom to do what they have to do, but as a lawyer and as a citizen and somebody who has worked on this, I think what the court could easily do is to reaffirm that right to privacy is indeed a fundamental right, although subject to reasonable restrictions, as all fundamental rights are.
Well, Jay, if you could weigh in on this, because a lot of the debate today when you go online, a lot of people asking this question about whether in 21st century India we should even be having this debate at all, that the Supreme Court has to sit and decide whether this should be a fundamental right. What do you think?
Nidhi, you might be aware that I have moved a private member's bill in the Lok Sabha for privacy and data protection. But at the same time, I am also a supporter of Aadhaar. And in fact, the comments that the court seems to have been making today is very much in line with what I have written in my op-eds. And in fact, this morning I have tweeted that I support rights to privacy, but in 21st century it can't be absolute. So please allow me to make 2 or 3 points on this. The first is, the right to privacy, of course, is important, but so far it has been inferred. As my friend Ashwini was pointing out, the fundamental right of life and dignity has been inferred by several court judgments to provide limited rights of privacy. Now, in the 21st century, we have already consciously conceded many rights of privacy. For example, when you go to the airport, you go through a scanner. When you drive around in the city, you have CCTV cameras. And by the way, the modern latest versions of these also have biometric identification. CCTV cameras in the streets are able to identify persons from the pictures that they take. So in coming years, the whole issue of whether you have to give your thumb impression or iris scan is a moot point, because you have all these systems out there, and we have voluntarily given this information. We have voluntarily permitted the authorities to do this. Secondly, we ourselves unthinkingly but consciously give out our own data to apps and websites and other services. And secondly, when we indulge in online financial transactions, all kinds of privacy issues and data protection issues come into play. So I would say the following. In the 21st century, it is, I don't think, practical to insist on an absolute right of privacy. But I do believe that we can have a right to privacy with narrowly defined exceptions of where they can be breached. So I will end my arguments with 1 point. Take, for example, terrorism, and we have national security concerns here. So should there be the ability by either private parties or governments to dig down into any individual's correspondence or emails and snoop on them, invade their privacy without due cause, without prima facie evidence? No, there should not. But most modern societies today allow authorities to snoop on what is called metadata. So perhaps they have computers and algorithms which track the word RDX, and if the word RDX is continuously showing up in somebody's email or somebody's SMS, that may be ground to examine why a person is so interested in RDX, and then take the appropriate authorizations to then snoop on that person directly. So these issues of privacy have to be considered in pragmatic terms of the 21st century. To sum it up, we should have rights of privacy.
No, you've made some very important points about how, you know, we end up compromising our privacy when we go online, when we use WhatsApp, when we use Facebook even. I mean, there are all these privacy debates that surround these social media sites. The criticism of Aadhaar, however, has been that, you know, you have your biometric data all linked to your medical records, to your bank accounts. You know, your every move you make can literally be tracked under this one umbrella. And today, just today, the government told the Lok Sabha that 210 websites of the government, central and state, ended up displaying a list of beneficiaries along with their names and Aadhaar numbers. They admitted this in the Lok Sabha today. So that, to a lot of folks, is just downright scary, that kind of data breach can happen, and the government says that they're looking into how this happened. Jay.
So let's unpack these issues. Today, whether you like it or not, there are many companies out there which already have a lot of this data that you're talking about. There are many companies, for example, Google Analytics can tell many things about you that you may not be aware about yourself. To say that government having this is a problem, yes, but it must be regulated. As I said, rights to privacy must exist with narrowly defined exceptions. So let me just also add one other issue here. Just the fact of Aadhaar numbers being bandied about is not necessarily a threat, although that should also be protected, and there should be penalties leading up to even imprisonment for people who treat data cavalierly or misuse their access to data. And that goes to the data protection aspect of the private members bill, which I have moved, and we desperately need it. And this has nothing to do with Aadhaar. As Nandan Nilekani himself has pointed out many times, if somebody were to maliciously try to hack into your private data and information, Aadhaar would probably be fairly low on the list of ways that they could, get. There are many other easier ways to get your data.
But we've known it to be compromised. We have Indira Jaisingh and Mohan Guruswamy also joining us on this discussion. Indira Jaisingh, you have actually extensively been talking about the dangers associated with Aadhaar, and here we're talking about two things. On one hand Aadhaar, the other is the whole issue of right to privacy and whether it's a fundamental right. Jay was saying here that he doesn't believe that our right to privacy is compromised, that that Aadhaar, that he supports Aadhaar and he believes that it's something that we need. Ms. Jaisingh, your thoughts on that?
See, the question is not whether we need Aadhaar or not. The question is, how is the entire Aadhaar scheme designed? There are design defects within the scheme which make hacking possible. We are aware of several such instances of hacking internationally where, entire power grids have been closed down for hours together through conscious criminal acts. Now, when you concentrate so much data in one central database, it has been described as a honeypot for hackers. There is no cyber hygiene, there is no cyber security hygiene in this country, which is why you mentioned that today in the Lok Sabha, the government admitted that there has been so much leakage from its own databases. Now, the thing is that they have destroyed the silos which exist between different databases. And how have they been destroyed? Just by one single number. If you have anybody's Aadhaar number, you can get access to every single database, whether it's my medical record,
exactly,
or whether it's my insurance record, whether it's my bank account, whether it's the tax return that I filed. Now, there is absolutely no explanation why these silos have been described. Now, in addition to that, do you know, I'm sure you know, that your biometrics can be stolen. You have laid the groundwork for identity theft. You have laid the groundwork for impersonation. As it has been said, a person's fingerprint is a signature that you leave all over the earth. And your digital fingerprint can be
Let me just take what you're
picked
saying
up
to,
on a
before I come to Mohan Guruswamy, to Ashwini Kumar here,
strip.
because these debates are linked. What do you think of the Aadhaar debate? Because that's what started off the Supreme Court setting up this bench.
This is precisely the problem. The entire debate is skewed. It is not that Aadhaar is not desirable. Our government started Aadhaar. Aadhaar is necessary for targeted delivery of subsidies and for a number of other reasons. The question that we ought to be asking on your show today is, and which is of paramount importance, what is the kind of society you are going to be living in? Do we, in the name of Aadhaar and such instruments, give sweeping rights to the government of the day to invade the privacy of citizens? The issue is, if the court were to declare privacy as a fundamental right, then the scope of restricting that right, and all fundamental rights are subject to reasonable restrictions, gets very limited. So really what we should be arguing today is for the court to recognize that privacy is a fundamental right. It is a right that is drawn not only inferentially, but also from Article 21, which affords to citizens a right to life with dignity, which means a right to reputations.
Do you think Aadhaar invades our privacy?
It does. It does in a number of ways. So what the answer really is to perhaps have technological interventions, perhaps redo the scheme in order to ensure that the benefits of Aadhaar can be made use of without in any way impacting the
I want
citizens'
to
right
take a
to
point
privacy.
that Jay Panda raised to Mohan Guruswamy, which is, and I think there I agree with Jay that when you live in societies, for instance, where you have a terror threat, you need to have, I think, a system where governments can track metadata and some kind of data to know what is going on. However, the danger obviously then becomes where that line is drawn, and Mohan Guruswamy, in the name of national security, so much else then happens which completely crosses every line. How do you stay within those lines, within those boundaries?
I think there is a right to privacy, but there is a right, how much of privacy, the limit of privacy has to be drawn. You cannot be an island where nobody knows anything about you. Actually, the state knows quite a lot about you. You have Aadhaar numbers, you have PAN numbers, you have bank accounts, everything is in the open domain. All the government is trying to do now is to correlate them together. If you have an Aadhaar card, link it to your PAN, link your PAN to your bank account, it's already there. So I don't know what this big argument is about. And there's a lot of talk about, your information will be out in the open. Information can still be stolen. They're stolen from credit cards, they're stolen from ATM terminals, they're stolen all over the place. But this argument that we cannot trust the state to protect data, which it is equally involved in, is equally concerned about, I think is a little specious, I don't really agree that, good government, people have a right to good government. Good government demands that you have Aadhaar, you have direct transfer of benefits, you have all these things. And for this, information is needed. To say that the state will misuse this, how can the state is not asking for your emails. The state is not asking for your correspondence.